This video is sponsored by Classic Football Shirts, the best place to get your classic and vintage football shirts. To get cheap retro Palace shirts, click the link in the description below. Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Swansea City by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you an exclusive interview with Frank de Boer after the game, so let's begin. Palace's search for their first points of the 2017-18 campaign will go into September as Swansea City ran out victors in SE25. Attacking duos Tammy and Jordan Ayew both netted for the visitors in the minutes before and after half-time, to leave Frank de Boer waiting for his first Premier League victory at the Eagles' helm, on what was a disappointing afternoon in SE25. The warning signs were evident just 3 minutes into the game as the Eagles had a big scare. Some nice link-up play on the right flank released Abraham, who sent a dangerous cross into the area right onto the head of the diving Ayew, but fortunately for the host the ball flashed wide of the mark when the net should have been rippling. They continued to enjoy the majority of the play in the opening stages, but gradually Palace came into the game, and on 18 minutes they nearly managed to break the deadlock when James McArthur nodded a Joe Ward cross wide of the mark, and having scored twice in midweek against Ipswich Town, the Scotsman had an appetite for goals, and just before the half an hour mark he dragged a shot wide from the edge of the box during a sustained spell of Palace pressure. However, the final 15 minutes of the first half would belong to the visitors, and the Swans made the most of it. They threatened to go ahead twice in a minute when a long ball downwards allowed Abraham to race onto it, and he managed to poke it goalwards under pressure from Timothy Fosu-Mensah, but Wayne Hennessy stuck a leg out to stop it. And then from the resulting corner, Alfie Mawson glanced the header fractions wide. But just before the break, the Swans did grab the opening goal. Following a sustained attack, the ball came over to the right flank, where Leroy Fer had too much time and space to send a dangerous delivery into the box, and Abraham got in front of Martin Kelly to tuck the chance past Hennessy from close range, and hand them the lead at the break. And 2 minutes after the restart, it got even worse. Having just seen a header from a corner saved by Lucas Fabianski, Kelly was caught in possession on the halfway line by Carl Norton, who instantly played in Ayew, and the Ghanaian charged forward before rounding Hennessy and rolling the ball into the empty net. Desperately needing something, Townsend was proven to be the main threat for the Eagles as he began to pepper the goal. 3 times he tried to reduce the deficit, firstly curling an attempt goalwards but couldn't find the required accuracy, then tried his luck from the opposite flank but could only scuff one at Fabianski's goal, and again fired wide with 15 minutes to go. Later on the Swans were content to soak up the pressure, and Johan Cabaye flashed a free kick over the top before Townsend had another go when a slice from Alfie Mawson kindly landed in his path. But taking aim from the bottom corner, he miscued and sent it just wide, and McArthur had the final attempt with an overhead kick which flashed just over. But the wait for the first point and goal continues. Crystal Palace will end the first month of the new Premier League season pointless after losing out 2-0 at home against Swansea City on Saturday. It was a third straight defeat for the Eagles as they succumbed to goals either side of half-time by Tammy and Jordan Ayew to give the Swans their first win of the Premier League season. But it leaves Palace boss Frank de Boer with plenty to ponder over his first international break of the campaign. But what did we learn from the latest defeat for the Eagles? Here are 5 things. Number 1. The team's confidence is shot to pieces. The Crystal Palace squad looked short of confidence, and Frank de Boer admitted as much after the game. "If you are afraid or don't show courage, you'll never get what you want," he said after the game. "If you show courage, you will create much, much more. We have to show it every game, no matter what kind of system we play." Frank needs to find some way of injecting some belief into the players, and soon, because there is so much quality in that squad, the most the club have ever had, but that isn't being utilised at the moment. Number 2. Palace need a big week in the transfer window. Frank is insistent that his team will play the 3-4-3 system this season, but it's becoming increasingly apparent that he doesn't have the players to fit the system. That's not to say that some of the players are not good enough, but maybe they're just not the right ones. Andros Townsend thrived under Sam Allardyce's direct approach, but seems lost in De Boer's new approach, while Christian Benteke is looking increasingly isolated. If Frank is going to make it work, then he needs to bring in the sort of players who are used to that sort of system. But he only has 4 days left to do it, and he needs the backing of the board big time. Number 3. Injuries have taken their toll. Not that it's an excuse, but De Boer has had some pretty bad luck when it comes to injuries. Star man Wilfried Zaha has been out since the first day of the season after getting kicked from pillar to post against Huddersfield. Ruben Loftus-Cheek joined him in the treatment room this week with a groin injury, whilst new signing Jarrah Reedwald has been missing for the past fortnight also. And against Swansea, James Tonkins picked up an injury, ballooning the ball way over the bar, which could be the most Palace injury ever. Martin Kelly coming on and having a mare backs up the point that De Boer needs additions, and quick, to bolster the quality and depth in his squad. Number 4. Individual mistakes need to be cut out. Both goals against Swansea came from individual mistakes. Patrick Van Aanholt completely misjudged the ball and gave possession back, whilst Kelly got on the wrong side of Abraham, who was able to prod home. For the second, Kelly dribbled into Carl Norton, who stole the ball off of him and fed Ayew, who bundled through a weak Wayne Hennessy challenge to score. Add to that Luka Milivojevic passing the ball to Sadio Mane to score the only goal of the game last weekend, and that's a whole lot of individual errors that could have been avoided. How Frank cuts those out, though, is another question. And number 5, the fans deserve better. Palace fans are a loyal bunch. There is a smattering of boos at full time, but most of the hardly souls who were still there applauded Frank and the players off in a showing of support. Add to that the brilliant fan display from the Huddersfield game, and really the Eagles fans deserve better. The fans are the only ones in red and blue turning up and performing each week so far. So now I'm going to move on to the player ratings, but before I do that, don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at @Palace for a place to get all the latest Palace news. And also, if you're on Facebook, do feel free to join our Facebook group, which I think is a really good place for you to join in with discussions with other fans, much like forums. And also, it's a good place for you to share your opinion with other fans, read what other fans have to say, and also a good place for you to share videos and photos if you were at the game, or anything to do related with Palace, you can share it in the group. Now, another place you can share your opinion, and that is in the YouTube comments. So if you are listening to the video and the podcast on YouTube, then do drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, and that's rating the players out of 10, obviously 10 being the best and 1 being the worst, and along with some of your views from the game. So you don't necessarily have to identify each player, but if there's something you saw throughout the game which you want to comment and share about, then of course do feel free to do it in the YouTube comments. And that's so myself looking back on the YouTube comments, I can see what you guys thought about the game and what who you thought the best player was, and also anyone else who comes to the video, they can see your opinion as well. So all different fans can come together and see each other's opinion. Now, if you do want to find any of these social media groups and you're struggling to find them, all the links you will need will be in the description below. But we're going to start off now with the player ratings, starting off with Wayne Hennessy, who I'm going to give a 5. Was first called into action late on to deny Abraham low down at his near post, and was then beaten by the second shot he faced as Abraham poked under him. Too weak for Swansea's second, limply poking his leg out towards Ayew, that wasn't enough. Palace fans ironically cheered when he caught a long ball in the second half. So obviously Wayne Hennessy here, I've given him a 5, and considering how much I credited him for his performance against Liverpool last weekend, his performance against Swansea was a real disappointment, and that's why I've given him a 5. But to start off with a few things, obviously we did lose 2-0, but the first goal, I don't really think we can blame it too much on him, so I'm not really going to concentrate that much on the goal. But just looking back at the game, it was Van Aanholt who lost his man on the wing, who crossed the ball in, and then Martin Kelly didn't get close enough to Abraham, and Abraham slotted past Hennessy. So Hennessy was expecting the defender to cover the area, the cross came in, Martin Kelly didn't do that, and we went on to concede the first goal just before half time. So in that respect, I don't think we can really blame Hennessy, and considering he made a save just before the goal from Abraham again, so he still made a save to stop Abraham scoring on that chance. But with the first goal, he didn't really have a chance. And then to move on in the second half, didn't really have too much to do. But for Swansea's second goal, I don't even know what the hell he was doing. You see Martin Kelly lost the ball on the left hand side of the field. He goes across to try and he tries to cross it forward, loses the ball, tries to track back. Scott Dann tries to play offside, but obviously Ayew wasn't offside, so there was no one there. He went to go past Hennessy. Hennessy literally dived at the ball, went to go and sort of kick the ball, but it was so limp, Ayew just took the ball around him. So what Hennessy really should be doing there is putting his foot through that ball, clearing it up the field, not trying to sort of slide tackle him and get the ball from his feet, because obviously Hennessy, as he's dived, Ayew's just gone around his feet and Hennessy just sat there and watched the ball go in. So in that respect, decision making, once again, a problem with Hennessy. In that aspect, it was really, really bad. What he should have done is he should have come off his line much sooner and put his foot through the ball. He shouldn't be there trying to slide tackle the ball and get the ball back. What he should be doing, just put all your power and clear the ball out of danger. And that's the thing, really. You know, in the first half, he made a save when the ball came to him and he always went to claim the ball. There was one where Fosu-Mensah almost got the ball off Abraham. Abraham managed to get the ball back and Hennessy made himself big. So that in that time, he came off his line, made that decision. But for the goal in the second half, I don't even know what he was doing. Yes, it was a mistake by Kelly for letting the ball go. Yes, it was a mistake by Scott Dann for not trying to play offside when he wasn't and let him run through. But also a really, really bad decision-making mistake from Hennessy. He should have, like I said, he should have cleared the ball. But unluckily for us, you know, I think it was Ayew scored the second goal. He was able to dribble around him and obviously poke it into the empty net. And it's quite ironic. Obviously, the fans, if you look back at the highlights of the game in the second half, when Hennessy did go to claim a long ball, everyone was cheering because he showed that he's got his height. He should be claiming every cross and still he doesn't. But when he does do it, we do obviously cheer him sarcastically. But Wayne Hennessy here, I've given him a 5. And considering how well he played against Liverpool, this performance was slightly disappointing. And like I said at the beginning, we can't really blame him too much for the first goal. But for the second goal, I don't know what he was doing. He should have put his foot through the ball and obviously cleared the danger. Now to move on to the first centre-back of our back three, and that is Timothy Fosu-Mensah, who I'm going to give a 6. Positional awareness was very astute. Deloney did the basics well and was always a good option. A few well-timed tackles helped win back possession. Nearly caught out by Abraham as he raced back to cover the through ball and was bailed out by a Wayne Hennessy save. Switched to right back in the second half and wasted possession a few times with some poor crosses, but showed a good turn of pace to get back and win the balls a few times. So obviously Fosu-Mensah here, I've given him a 6, and much like the game against Liverpool and the one before against Huddersfield, he was probably one of the better players on the pitch. And considering we did go on to lose the game, it's very weird that you would say that about a defender. But I think out of our 3 defenders, or the 3 starting defenders in the back 3, he was probably one of the better players. But just to talk about, basically repeat what I said last week, you know, his positional awareness, he always knows where he has to play, whether he's playing at the right wing back role, whether he's playing at right back, whether he's at centre back, he's always got that awareness, and it's a very astute, so he always knows where he has to be, and he does the basics right. So when, like the saying goes, if in doubt, if out, whenever he was in danger, he'd either try and play it out or clear the danger. So he always done the basics of the defending right, and always he was a good option. So obviously where we're trying to play an expansive style of football, which isn't really going well, but when we're trying to do it, we're always trying to get the ball from the defenders to the midfielders to the attack, rather than just pumping long balls. And Fosu-Mensah certainly caught on to that idea, and he's always a good option. So whenever the midfielders can't get the ball forward, you know, pass it back to Fosu-Mensah here, try and create something. So he's good at being that option. And like the game against Liverpool, like against Huddersfield, defensively he was very good, but his tackles as well, and that's one of the things that he's got ahead of the likes of Scott Dann, James Tompkins. The fact that he's got the pace so he can run in behind a defender who's running in on goal, run behind him, hook his feet round and make these last ditch tackles, and he's done that in this game as well. So yes, he's done all these good things right, and that's why I've given him a 6. But obviously Abraham almost scored from a Fosu-Mensah mistake. Obviously Fosu-Mensah saw the ball was coming in. I think it was a ball over the top. Fosu-Mensah managed to muscle out Abraham, get the ball at his feet, and just as Fosu-Mensah went to clear the ball, Abraham got the ball back, had a shot, and obviously Hennessy was able to save it. But you know, there's good and bad things about that one chance for Swansea in particular. The fact that the ball over the top, the fact that Fosu-Mensah was able to cope with that and be more physical than Abraham to keep hold of the ball was really, really impressive. But then obviously the bad thing is that Abraham was able to turn around Fosu-Mensah and win the ball back. But obviously Hennessy was there to do what a goalkeeper should do and make a save. But to be honest, in the second half, he was probably one of our better players, even in the second half. Obviously, we moved to a back four, sort of a 4-3-3 formation, similar to what we were playing towards the tail end of last season. Switched back to the right back role, and yes, he wasted possession a few times, obviously gave the ball away, and that's probably because he was used to playing as a centre back in the first half. But that aside, switched to right back, and yes, he gave away possession where he gave the ball away at his feet, or when he put a cross in and the cross didn't go to anyone. Obviously, like I said already, good turn of pace, getting behind of attackers, win the ball back. And that's the thing, you know, there's a few times where Swansea were using their pace, their two men up top, to put pace down the wings and down the middle. And obviously Fosu-Mensah used his pace to counter that and obviously to win back the ball. But overall, Fosu-Mensah I think is a really fair 6. And like I said last week, the week before that, probably one of Palace's best players. Now let's move on to the central centre-back, Scott Dann, who I'm going to give a 6. Found Ayew a handful to being with, allowing the Swansea man a free diving header early on, but grew into the game and put in plenty of important blocks. So obviously Scott Dann here, I've given him a 6, and much like Fosu-Mensah, he had an alright game, and it weren't as good necessarily as the game last weekend against Liverpool, but when you compare the Swansea game to the Huddersfield game, I think the whole team have improved slightly, but this is sort of, we took 2 steps forward with the game against Liverpool, and we took another step back with the loss to Swansea, because Scott Dann, he showed against Liverpool that when the system works and when we play to our strengths, playing a back 5 or back 3, we can play really well. And that's why Jurgen Klopp has come out after the game and said actually Palace were actually harder to beat than Arsenal were, and considering Liverpool beat Arsenal 4-0, it says something about how we played last weekend. And we would think that when we made an improvement against Liverpool, we'd take that sort of improvement defensively into the Swansea game. But like I said, it was almost like we took 2 steps forward after Liverpool and 1 step back after the Swansea game, because really, or maybe yeah, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, I think the saying is. But the fact is, we improved against Liverpool, and instead of continuing that form and continuing how well we played, it was a slightly worse performance. But Scott Dann here, obviously I've mentioned this with Wayne Hennessy, Kelly and Scott Dann, they were at mix for the second goal we conceded. They sort of lost their man marker, but Scott Dann in the first half, talk about that before I talk about the goal. Are you playing with Abraham up front, a really powerful duo, whether they were running down the flanks, down the middle, and obviously Scott Dann in particular was faced with Ayew, and Ayew obviously was quite a physical presence, quite a fast presence for Swansea up top, and he was quite a handful. You know, Scott Dann did struggle a little bit to deal with him, and the main example of that is when early on in the game a cross came in, which Swansea kept doing, put crosses into the box. Ayew was unmarked, so had a free header, and obviously he put it wide, and that was quite early on in the game. And if you look back at the game and look more in the second half, other than the second goal we conceded, defensively we were a lot better, and obviously they've learnt their lessons from the first half where they were letting too many crosses come in from the Swansea players. But other than that, in the first half, he grew into the game, much like Fosu-Mensah, kept putting in important blocks and important tackles. But, you know, talk about the goal. Martin Kelly tried to, you know, be clever and win possession back and get the ball up the field. As he's done that and tried to do that, he's lost the ball. And Scott Dann, instead of Scott Dann running and at least trying to keep up with Ayew, he decided to stay back and try and play the offside when clearly it wasn't offside. So all the time he's standing there with his hand up in the air, what he should have been doing is, okay, by all means put your hand up in the air for the offside, but you should continue to chase down Ayew, because that way you might have a little bit of a chance of doing it. Because you see, Hennessy could have come off his line, you know, Ayew may have to have, you know, dinked the ball over Hennessy, and Scott Dann, if he was running, could have got back and cleared it off the line. But, you know, that's something that could have happened. It might necessarily not have happened, but the point is there, you know, Scott Dann, instead of trying to claim the offside, what he should be doing is continuing to run, still have his hand up in the air for the offside if it's not going to be given, or it is, and then if Hennessy comes out of goal and Ayew dinks it over him, then obviously with him still running, he may be able to get back and obviously clear it. But other than that, so other than the fact the free header in the first half and obviously the complete mix up for the first goal, I thought he had an alright performance, and that's why I've given him a 6. And when we did change formation in the second half, I think it showed his adaptability. Even though he may not be fantastic in the back 3, when we played that he was alright, and then when we played to a back 4, he was a lot more comfortable than he's been in past weeks. But we're going to move on now to the I think he was playing left centre-back in this game, and that is James Tomkins, who I'm also going to give a 6. Not given much to do defensively, but grew innate when trying to pass the ball out from the back, only to find a lack of options. Had time to line up a shot from the edge of the box late on and blazed it well over. So obviously James Tomkins here, I've given him a 6, and considering he got taken off midway through the first half when he got injured, I thought he had an alright performance, and I think the thing that changed the game, the thing that meant we went on to concede, is the fact that when Kelly came on, so Tomkins went off injured, and then Martin Kelly came on, and because Martin Kelly hadn't been playing that half, he wasn't quite used to the system we were playing. Obviously that resulted in us conceding the goal, because I personally think, and loads of people have said, the game changing point was Tomkins going off, because I thought overall in the first half, the time he was on the pitch, maybe the 30 to 40 minutes, I thought he was fairly solid in the game. You know, defensively, like Scott Dan, like Fossey Mensah, he was making important blocks, and he was contributing quite a lot to the team defensively. But unluckily for us, he got injured. You know, we had a corner, I believe it was, the ball got crossed into the area, headed down, and obviously Tomkins picked up the ball on the edge of the area, had a shot, but as he's hit the volley, he's ended up pulling his hamstring, or I'm not sure exactly what he done. It looked like his hamstring. It could have been he might have twigged his knee or his ankle, but as he's hit the volley, it's gone right into the White Horse Lane end, so it's gone right out, completely away from goal, sky high, and obviously he's injured himself in the process. But you know, other than that, the fact that he went off injured, yes, it was the game-changing point, but what he'd done defensively was alright, and unlike Scott Dan, there was no mistake he made in particular, which I can identify, that actually gave Swansea a chance to score. So unlike Scott Dan, where he gave the chance to Ayew, James Tomkins, the time he was on the pitch, he done his defensive duties very well. But the one thing I must say about his performance, and I did mention it here, but he did become to grow irritated with the players throughout the game. So obviously when he was playing as a centre-back, because we've got 3 centre-backs, you want to be ball playing, you want to play an expansive style of football. So Tomkins has picked up the ball in the area and there's no one to pass to, so what he's got to do, he's a centre-back, he should be staying in his own side of the field, but what he does, he makes runs forwards to try and pass the ball to the midfield so they can supply for the strikers. But instead what happens is he's just running and there's no option, so he just has to pass back. And the fans within the stadium, looking back at the game, I'm thinking this is quite frustrating. All he kept doing is when he was driving forward, there was no one to pass to, so he had to pass it back, and everyone was getting frustrated because it was really, really boring. But that's the point. If you want to play the ball from the back and you want to be expansive, you've got to have the options there to pass the ball to. And obviously they've been instructed not to play long balls, so when they have the ball, you need to have the options there. So the likes of Punchin, Luca playing in the midfield, MacArthur, these players weren't getting close enough to the defenders or the attackers, so that when Tomkins was making these runs forward, there was no one for him to pass to, and that's why fans got frustrated, because he kept passing the ball back to Wayne Hennessy. But overall, I think a 6 from him. You know, if he's with the international break, hopefully, because his injury looks like it's not too serious, he can overcome from that injury, because I think all the time that Reed Ward's out, Tomkins is proving why he's the better centre-back from what we've seen so far. So hopefully in the next few weeks he'll regain his fitness again and maybe play against Burnley in the next few weeks. But I think, yeah, you know, talking about his performance, I think a 6 is a fair result. Obviously moving on now to the right wing back Joe Ward, who I'm going to give a 5. A solid half from Ward, who worked hard to get back and win balls a few times, although he hasn't been challenged nearly as much as he was at Anfield a week ago, obviously. Did well to get to the byline to push back for Tomkins, who blazed over. Switched to left back in the back 4 after the break, and ironically looked more comfortable. So to Joe Ward here, I've given him a 5, and although I did mention there how his first half performance was alright, and it was, you know, the standard, the basic, what you would expect of a defender, in the second half, with him moving to left back in the back 4, he didn't really have as huge impact on the game as you would have hoped. But just to talk about his first half performance, you know, he unlike the game against Anfield, where he had the likes of Mane and Robinson continuously running at him, in this game with Swansea not really playing that well, they're not really as good and as powerful and have as much pace as Liverpool do, but he probably had the better of them. You know, he obviously playing in the right wing back role, he won the ball back a few times, you know, running up and down the flank. And like I said, although he wasn't challenged, so although there wasn't the pace of Mane and the skill of Robertson, he still, you know, was kept busy and he still worked hard, even though it's not as good of a quality opposition as it was against Anfield last week. So you can understand him playing better because the opposition, let's say, are not as good, but still it weren't really challenged as much as he could have been in the first half. And you know, there's an example here where he did get to the byline and pulled the ball back for James Tompkins, and obviously Tompkins blazed over. So the fact that he was able to not only do an alright job defensively, running up and down the flank and working hard, he also was able to try and create a chance for Tompkins. And like I said already, Tompkins blazed the ball over. But I think, you know, I've given him a 5 because it wasn't really an impressive performance, and considering how well he's played in the past, like I've said a few weeks ago, you know, he's starting to, in the last sort of season and a half, he started to decline, and we saw that in this game again. He weren't the player he used to be, and that may be because he's playing out of position. He's a right back, but he's playing, you know, at right wing back. Maybe that is a big thing for him, and it was quite ironic that when he moved to the back four, and when he was playing at left back, not necessarily right back, but he was playing as left back, he looked a lot more comfortable on the ball, because obviously that's his position. He's used to not having to attack, he's used to being a defender, playing as a, you know, left or right back, so he's not used to going forward, he's used to staying back and defending. And ironically, like I said, he played so much better when he was playing in the back four. So whether that's something that, you know, De Boer may try, you know, if we change the formation mid-game, he may try Joe Ward at left back, but I personally was not impressed by his performance. You know, I don't think, unlike the game against Huddersfield and Liverpool, I don't think he done anything wrong in this game, and I can't really criticise him too much for his performance. But the reason I've given him a 5, it was just a really, really standard performance. There was nothing really good about it. He wasn't terrible like he's been in past games, but he weren't really a performance I can look at and go, he actually had a good game, he done what he was meant to do. But I personally think if we bring in another striker or we bring in another winger, I personally think that we need to move Townsend, unless he leaves obviously, but I think we should move Townsend to the right wing back role, drop Joe Ward to the bench because he's an alright squad rotation player, and then that way we can play the new striker or the new winger up front and then move Townsend there, because I think Townsend's got something that Joe Ward hasn't, and that's the pace and the work ethic to play at that wing back role. But do comment below whether you think Joe Ward or Andros Townsend or a new signing should play in the right wing back role. But you know, just to go over his performance again, a 5 from him I think is a really fair result considering his subpar performance. Now to move on to the midfielder Luka Milivojevic, who I'm going to give a 6. Some routine blocks from the midfield enforcer in the centre of the park, but he looked frustrated at times on the ball at the lack of options. Replaced by Yohan Cabaye 15 minutes into the second half. So obviously Luka here, I've given him a 6, and much like what we've begun to expect from him, it was a fairly solid performance, and considering how he's had sort of ups and downs during pre-season and the start of the season, I don't necessarily think this is one of his worst performances, but certainly the standard we saw last season, this was nowhere near it. But just to talk about what he done defensively, you know, if we look back at what Fosu Mensah done, what Dan done, what Tompkins done, they all doing their defensive duties, made loads of routine tackles and blocks. The same can go for Luka, obviously with him playing slightly deeper than say Punchin is in the midfield. Luka, we all know he makes all these routine blocks and tackles, so he done that in this game. So everything we'd expect of him he done, and he sort of enforced himself in the midfield, so he was the enforcer, making sure things could happen in the midfield. He was the one controlling the way the team performed. But when I talked about Tompkins, about when Tompkins got the ball at his feet, he tried to push forward and pass to other players around him. He obviously couldn't do that, and that's why Tompkins obviously had a frustrating game and fans were booing him because he had nowhere to pass the ball. The same can really go from Luka, because Luka's the sort of person, the guy in the team who should be receiving the balls from Tompkins, but obviously Tompkins, when he surged forward, there was nowhere for him to pass, so he had to pass it back. And the same can go for Luka. You know, sometimes when other players like Punchin or maybe the wing backs, Vanano, Ward, when these guys had the ball, you know, they weren't looking to find someone like Luka, and when he had the ball, you know, there was no one to give the ball, or for him to give the ball to. So when someone like Ward and Vanano had the ball, they weren't passing the ball to Luka, obviously making him frustrated. But then he was as frustrated that when he did have the ball, when he was trying to spread it out and give it to the attackers, he couldn't do that because there was the lack of options. So although I've given him the 6 because I thought that the way he enforced himself in the midfield and sort of had that control, I thought was really good. But obviously the fact that he wasn't able to get on balls, and the fact that he wasn't able to spread the balls because there was no options, was also quite frustrating as well. And obviously he got taken off for Yohan Cabaye. I'll go on to talk about Cabaye later on in the substitutes. but the game did change when Cabaye came on, because Cabaye added a little bit more dynamism, let's say, to the Palace midfield in the second half. But Luca is really quite concerning, the way he's declined under the Boer so far. You know, in pre-season he looked alright playing at centre-back, and maybe that's what we need to do this season. Maybe because he doesn't fit into this system, the 3-4-3, because you don't really have defensive midfielders in that formation, maybe moving him back to centre-back might actually be beneficial for him, because then that means that he's able to get the ball from the defence and go forward, and that way he's not in the midfield where he has to push up and attack, and he's not necessarily just as a defensive midfielder. And that's the thing that's really quite concerning. We know how good he is defensively. He's not a centre-back because he hasn't really got that sort of skill to do that. We saw that with the back pass and the back headers he done during pre-season. So he hasn't got the skill to do that, but he's got the perfect skill to be your all-round defensive midfielder. But when you're playing a 3-4-3, the back three don't really need protection, because there's three of them plus the wing backs, which means his position's sort of wasted in midfield. So if we do move back to, say, a 4-3-3 formation, something which the Boer has used at Ajax and has used at some parts already this season when things haven't been going our way. If he does change to that system, we'll have the two sort of attacking midfielders with Luca sitting deep, and that will suit him really well. But it's really concerning, really, considering how well he was last season, towards the end of last season, and how he hasn't really started off and played well this season. And if you look back to last season, he was a player who never got substituted. Unless he was injured, he always stayed on the pitch. But now he's getting replaced, while someone like Punchin, who had an even worse performance in my opinion, didn't play as well as Milivojevic did. Someone like Punchin staying on the pitch while Milivojevic is getting taken off, and maybe that's something that's hurting his confidence. But overall, I've given him a 6. Like I said at the beginning, some routine blocks, really good defensive work throughout the game. And this is the thing really that we need to change in this formation, and hopefully the international break will allow us to do that. But we need to make sure that if we're playing at 3 at the back, we need to make sure the defenders and the midfielders have got options to pass the ball to, but also that they're able to get on the end of chances created. But overall, I think a 6 is a fair result. Obviously, moving on now to the captain, Jason Punchin, who I'm going to give a 5. Gave away possession cheaply early on, but became more involved as the half wore on. Tired a shot from the edge of the box late on, but it skewed just wide. Didn't do much to improve on that after the break, sadly. So obviously Punchin here, I've given him 5, and he's sort of the opposite to Luca in the fact that Luca may not have had his best game considering how well his standards were, but Punchin was completely substandard in this game. You know, when you're playing as a central midfielder, you've got to be, and especially when you're playing an expansive style of football, you've got to make sure that you keep possession, you keep the ball at your feet, you don't give away the ball. And unluckily for us, Punchin, playing in that sort of centre mid role, gave away possession on numerous occasions. And although, you know, we gave that away sort of in the early parts of the first half, towards the end he slowly grew into the game and was carrying the ball more than he was, say, in the first sort of 20-30 minutes. And so, you know, in that respect, the fact that he improved his performance is a good thing. And the fact that he tried a shot from the edge of the box, obviously he went just wide. So the fact that he actually tried to have a shot, which he hasn't done in the past few weeks and seasons, I don't really think it was a really that good of a game from him, and that's why I've given him a 5. The fact that he had the chance to get involved, you know, playing in that centre mid role, he could have done what Luca did and carried the ball really well and tried to look for options. But instead, whenever he has the ball, it looks like he's nervous. He tries to shuffle and move, you know, make space forward, where when he does a turn, he ends up losing the ball. So, you know, although he improves as games went on, his impact isn't as good, say, as it was maybe last season, 2 seasons ago. And that's the thing with Punchin. You know, he may be a really good captain. You know, he's a good leader on the pitch. He's always talking to the youngsters, telling all the players on the pitch where they have to play and where they have to be. But maybe someone like Wayne Rooney, John Terry, they were the captains of Chelsea and Man United respectively, but they weren't always playing on the pitch. And maybe that's what we need to do with Punchin. You know, he is a player on the decline in his old age, and maybe we need to take him off the field, play someone like Cabaye, who came off the bench, to make an impact, play Milivojevic, Loftus-Cheek when he comes back, and Luca, play them sort of free in the midfield, and let Punchin have that impact, have that influence from his captaincy, but from the bench. Because at the moment he's sort of dragging the team down, because when you play an expansive style of football, you need to have a really controlling central midfielder, and that is something that Punchin clearly is not. And you know, just to talk about his second half performance, much like the first half, didn't really improve. And obviously it's quite disappointing because we all thought maybe they go inside, and considering the whole team improved, we thought okay, maybe Puncheon will get a little bit more involved this half, but sadly he obviously didn't, and that's why I've given him a 5. But a disappointing performance from the captain, and certainly if players do come in the transfer window and we change our formation again, maybe to a 3-4-3, or we go to that, or maybe we try the 4-3-3 again, whatever formation we plays, I think Puncheon really, it doesn't matter whether he's the captain, I think he's slowly going to lose his place because his performances certainly are not deserving a place in the team. Now to move on to the left wing back, Patrick Van Aanholt, who I am going to give a 5. Nearly played Hennessy into danger with a weak back pass that the Palace keeper did well to clear under pressure from Abraham, and gave away possession far too cheaply a number of times as well. Made plenty of overlapping runs and put in one great cross early on that no one was there for. Gave the ball away in the lead up to Abraham's first half goal. So obviously Patrick Van Aanholt here, I've given him a 5, and when a player gets taken off at half time, it does show that they're not really having a great game, and that is certainly what we did see with Patrick Van Aanholt's performance. But the first thing really to talk about, I talked about Hennessy not really having too much to do. His indecision making was bad for the second goal, but overall in the game he was alright, and certainly he did save Patrick Van Aanholt on one occasion, and that was when Patrick Van Aanholt gave the ball away, or he gave the ball away because he played a weak back pass, and obviously Hennessy was able to stay composed, which is something he hasn't done recently, stay composed and obviously clear the danger. And obviously Abraham and Ayew playing up front, they played quite high press, so they were putting pressure on our defenders. So when you put a weak back pass, it's obviously going to put Wayne Hennessy under pressure, but when Abraham went to chase the ball, even though it was quite awkward, Hennessy was able to clear away the danger. So in that aspect, it was really bad from Van Aanholt. We know how good he can be passing and crossing, so he should really be putting in good passes and good pass backs to the keeper, but on this occasion he didn't. And the same can go for his possession as well. He gives away passes, weak back passes, but also he gives away possession too much. So whether that be when he's running forward trying to create an attack, or he gets tackled far too easily, and instead of riding out for the tackle, he gets tackled to the ground, gives the ball away. Whether it's be when he crosses the ball but it completely goes where it's not meant to go and the ball gets taken away, possession given away, whether it be anything like that, he done that really bad in the first half. He kept giving away possession, and it was far too cheaply at times. It wasn't like he put in a really decent cross and it got headed clear. It was, he puts in crosses, but they were so bad crosses that he was just flying away possession, so giving it away. So whenever he had the ball, putting in these crosses, they were getting cleared, and there was no point of him even having a touch on the ball because he was just going to give it away every time. But the one good thing about his performance, he made plenty of overlapping runs, which is what you would expect from a wing back, and there was one decent cross. So all these other crosses he gave away possession, but there was one in particular in the in the first half. He obviously done a 1-2 with Benteke, got the ball back, put in a lovely decent cross, but obviously Benteke, 3 plays in front of him, Townsend couldn't quite get on it. Obviously Patrick Van Aanholt put the ball into the box, really good cross, and obviously no one was there to connect to it and score from it. So he showed that he can cross, but for the majority of this half, so other than that one cross, maybe the 6-7 other crosses and passes he made throughout the game, they all got intercepted and gave away possession. But obviously, giving away possession, it did end up costing us. The other times Hennessy saved his back, but the final touch he got on the ball was when he, gave the ball away to Abraham. So instead of clearing it, if in doubt, hoof it out. Instead of just clearing the ball, he tried to be clever, gave away possession, and obviously Abraham was able to score. So in that respect, I talked about blaming Hennessy and Dan and Kelly for the second goal we conceded in the second half. For the first half goal, obviously you can blame Kelly for not marking his man close enough, but also Patrick Van Aanholt wasn't marking. I believe it was Ayew who put the cross in. So if he had not given away possession and was able to clear the ball, clear the danger, then that cross never would have gone in, and it would have ended the half 0-0, which probably would have been a fair result if you look back at the game. But a disappointing performance from him, and the fact that was an individual mistake from not only Kelly but obviously Van Aanholt as well. But overall, it wasn't a terrible performance. Like I said, there's positives to take. The fact that, unlike against Liverpool, he was making more overlapping runs, and that's something he didn't do against Liverpool, didn't do against Huddersfield. So maybe a bit of training is helping him to finally discover, as a wing back, how you have to make these overlapping runs. But like I've said already, put Hennessy under danger, which luckily he was able to, clear his back, gave away possession far too cheaply, and that's why I've given him the 6. Obviously moving on now to the front three, or the attackers let's call them, starting off with Andros Townsend, who I'm going to give a 6. Plenty of hard work from the Palace number 10, but no end product of yet. Whipped in one cross that was a bit too high for Benteke and flashed a shot wide after cutting in on his right foot. Tried his best to get things going in the second half, flashing a few shots past the post. So obviously Andros Townsend here, I've given him a 6, and I'll go on to talk about the man of the match later on in the podcast, but he was probably one of Palace's most positive, most attacking outlets throughout the game, and I've already said this in the sort of the summary. He was probably the most hard-working player, and that's something you would expect of a player. You know, even though they might not be the most fantastic player, if they've got the right work ethics and they work hard to try and get something from the team, then that's what you want from a player. And Townsend has got the quality, but obviously in this game I've given him a 6 because he put in the effort, but not necessarily had the finishing you would normally expect from him. And we know he's got end product. He's really good at putting in crosses into the box, having shots from cutting inside, having shots, so we know he's got that. But in this game there was no end product, but I'm sure that that's to come. But to talk about one of his products he had, lovely corner, lovely cross, picked up the ball. So instead of him playing up front with Benteke, he drifted slightly wide, put in a lovely whipped cross, lovely height on it. Lovely height, lovely whip on it. Slightly too high for Benteke, but the height was more or less there. And obviously Benteke, with it being too high, wasn't able to just get on the end of it. And then I've talked about his end product, cutting inside. There was a chance where he flashed a shot wide after cutting inside. And if you listen back to the match review at the beginning of the podcast, you hear me talking about the few chances he had when he cut inside and had shots. But you know, I've said this already, we know he's really good at crossing. That one cross for Benteke was probably the main one, because Townsend was meant to be playing up front. But overall, he did at least try to get something from the game. He had that sort of ethic, that work ethic to work hard and at least try and get something from the game. But the few shots he had, the fact that he came on rejuvenated in the second half, he kept having shots, kept cutting inside, kept creating chances. So at least he was one of the players reacting to De Boer's half-time talk in the dressing room, and was actually trying to get something from the game. And you know, just to talk about the second half, he tried his best to get things going. So he was the one player, along with Chung Lee, who I'll talk about later, who came on the pitch, tried to make an impact. You know, Townsend, being one of our most positive players in this game, tried to get forward, tried to get the team going, and he did try his best in the second half. And there was a few shots, obviously he had the one in the first half, but in the second half there was 2 or 3 shots as well that went just past the post. You know, if you look at a few of them, if he had been slightly more controlled, the keeper was at his near post, so he could have easily put the ball into the far post. But I'm not going to criticise him, because we did end up losing the game, but he at least tried to get something he tried to get something from the game. But that's the thing with him. We know he's got the quality, we know he's got the work ethics, and he works hard. Now we're just going to make sure that he can finally nail that end product, because we know if he cuts inside, he can have a shot, he can score, but he's got to try and be a little bit more consistent, let's say, with his shots. But I've given him a 6. You know, there are rumours he could be leaving the club, maybe going to Leicester, and we get Demili Gray on a swap deal. And it's come out today, as I'm recording the podcast, that maybe that Townsend's agents and himself don't want a swap deal, so maybe he may go to Leicester. But I can't see him going to Leicester. If he does, then good luck to him. But based on this performance here, he is a crucial asset to us. And even if we do change the formation and he goes back to playing as a right winger or a left winger, I think that's the perfect system for him, because he can put in balls for Benteke as shown in this game. But overall, I think a 6 is a fair result. Obviously moving on now to James McArthur, who was playing a quite advanced midfield role, who I'm going to give a 6. Nodded a Milivojevic cross just wide early on in the half inside the box, but found himself dropping deeper and deeper to win the ball back as the half progressed. Flashed a low drive just wide of the post towards the end of the first half. It was played in nicely from Benteke in the second half, but could only toe poke it towards goal. So to James McArthur here, I've given him a 6, and much like what I've just mentioned with Townsend, he was probably one of Palace's best players on the day, and that's why obviously I've given him the 6. And just to talk about in the first half a few of the chances he had, you know, I said earlier on that it probably would have been fair for it to end 0-0, and that's because the chances we had in the first half weren't really that worthy. But the one that McArthur had, Milivojevic put the ball into the box, lovely cross, and obviously James McArthur got into the box, and obviously, you know, he put his header just wide. And then obviously sort of towards the end of the first half, he was dropping deeper and deeper because Townsend was playing up front with Benteke, and because James McArthur is playing as an advanced midfield role, he needs to try and get deep to get the ball from the likes of Punchin and Milivojevic. So as the half progressed, he got deeper and deeper, trying to pick up the ball. And at least, unlike someone like Punchin, who when he gets the ball, he doesn't know what to do with it. When McArthur gets the ball, much like what Milivojevic does with the ball, he picks up the ball, drives forward, and that's what he done. He done it really, really nicely. You know, he picked up the ball, even though he was meant to be playing slightly more advanced. He'd pick up the ball, drive forward, and at least try and create something from the team. So sort of towards the end of the first half, he was probably one of Palace's best players, and that sort of went on into the second half as well, and that's why I've given him the 6. You know, I'll probably give him, if I had to rate the players, you know, for both halves, I would have given him a 6 for both halves, because I thought he was quite consistent in the way he performed. But talk about another chance he had, you know, there was a low drive just wide of the post towards the end of the first half. So that's sort of towards the end of the first half, beginning of the second half. He had that shot. Yeah, I believe it was just before half time. Let's say that. So low drive, got played in, obviously just wide of the post. And then in the second half, I said already, you know, Benteke playing up front with McArthur playing in an advanced role. They'd done a nice link-up play. Benteke played in McArthur, but obviously as McArthur toe-poked it to goal, I believe it got saved and went wide, so he wasn't able to take that chance to the best way he could. But at least we're now starting to show something which we hadn't seen against Huddersfield and Liverpool. We're now starting to see the attacking players. They may not necessarily be creating loads of chances, but they're certainly creating more chances than they did in the past few weeks. And that was just evident here, where Benteke passed the ball to McArthur, and McArthur was able to have a shot on goal and create a chance. But overall, I think a 6 is a really fair result, considering the chances he had to score and goal. Obviously, the main one being the cross in the first half, where he headed just wide. The other one being when he got played in from Benteke. But overall, I think the goals he scored against Ipswich made sure he won his place back in the squad, and certainly he showed the team and he showed Frank de Boer why he should be starting. Now to move on to the final player of our starting 11, and that is Christian Benteke, who I am going to give a 5. Once again, an isolated half where he was often receiving the ball just inside the Swansea half, which is about 20 yards too deep. Didn't do much to alter that after the break, giving away possession with some lazy flicks. So obviously Christian Benteke here, I've given him a 5, and much like the likes of Townsend and McArthur, who were playing in quite advanced roles, Christian Benteke didn't quite have the influence he would have expected and hoped when he was going forward offensively. But once again, you know, yes, he may not have had the best game, and that's why I've given him a 5. But the thing that keeps popping up season upon season we've been playing with target men is that he's too isolated. So although we're playing a 3-4-3, it's meant to be expansive, and we're not meant to be putting loads of long balls and crosses into the box. If you can't get the ball to Christian Benteke and he's isolated, then there's no way we're going to create chances. And that was so evident in the first half. And when he did go and get the ball, that was when he was playing in our own half. So the fact that he should have been playing 20 yards further forward, so he shouldn't be getting the ball in our half or just inside the Swansea half. He should be getting it on the edge of the Swansea box, so he can either turn and have a shot, or, you know, the cross comes in and he can head it home. So he shouldn't really be receiving the ball in them areas. And you know, we talk about, people say, oh, he's lazy, but really he isn't, because this game is a prime example that if you don't get the ball to him and he has to come out into the midfield to pick up the ball in our own half, then you know there's a problem, because he's playing far too much deep. And that's something that's reoccurring about his performances this season, and certainly last season as well. And that's the thing we need to change. If we want to play this system with the 3-4-3, and we're not going to play with out and out wingers, we're going to play with sort of 2 left and right forwards, then we need to make sure that the wing backs and also the midfielders are putting in crosses, putting in balls into the box, because all you know, teams do in the Premier League, they just man mark Benteke with 2 players, meaning he's so isolated that when you put crosses to him or when you get the ball to him, he can't do anything with it because there's players all around him. And in this game, we've seen this in other games, if you gave more of the ball to him, maybe you could have done something with it, because if you look back at the game, this certainly wasn't a bad performance from him, considering all the scraps and balls he was given. But, you know, that's not really what you would expect from a £30 million striker. Yes, you would expect him to be really good on the ball, but if you don't actually get the ball to him and he's isolated, then you can't really criticise him, because he's doing what he can, but he can't do it because he's not being given the chances to do so. But you know, much like all of the players, some of the players improved in the second half, and I thought his performance didn't necessarily go down, but it didn't really alter. So his performance stayed quite the same through the first half into the second half, and still when he got the ball, because he was isolated, because there were loads of players around him, he gave away possession a few times because there was 2 or 3 players around him. There was nowhere for him to get the ball to or pass the ball to, so he tried to flick the ball and obviously lost possession that way. But I've given him a 5. I think it's not necessarily a really bad performance, but if we need Benteke, we really need Benteke to score some goals and get on the score sheet and have some impact. The only way he's going to do that is if we provide the chances for him. But like I said already, I think a 5's a fair result. Obviously, moving on now to the substitutes, starting with Martin Kelly, who I'm going to give a 4. Replaced the injured James Tompkins at the end of the first half and slotted into the back 3. Got the wrong side of Abraham and allowed the Swansea striker to poke home the opener. Compounded that misery by giving the ball away cheaply and allowing Norton to play in Ayew for Swansea's second. So obviously Martin Kelly here, I've given him a 4. I'm not really going to talk too much about his performance as a whole, but the 2 mistakes he made when he came on to replace James Tompkins. So obviously we did concede either side of half time. So the first goal we conceded just before the half time, Martin Kelly came on for James Tompkins, slotted into the back 3, and as the ball got whipped into Abraham, Martin Kelly, you know, he's quite a tall lad. He should really be, you know, right up close to Abraham, but he was on the wrong side of Abraham, didn't make an attempt to try and get the ball, and obviously the Swansea striker was able to score. So in that respect, Vanano made the mistake for letting the cross come into the area, and Martin Kelly made the mistake for A, not getting close enough to Abraham, and B, obviously, like I've said already, the fact that he was on the wrong side of him. And then it just got worse from him. We were already criticising him for that mistake. He comes out for the second half, even though we changed our formation, and obviously gives the ball away cheaply when he was trying to do some fancy stuff to keep possession, gave the ball away, and obviously Norton played in Ayew, lovely ball to Ayew, and obviously Swansea were able to score. So I've given him a 4, and really the 2 mistakes he made really just sums up his performance. But Martin Kelly, we've seen what he could do at the end of last season, and whether that's because he was playing alongside Sacco, who's a really big influence and could have changed him, or whether it's just the fact that Martin Kelly, when he loses his confidence, he loses it drastically, and then when he has confidence, he comes back and he's a really, really good player, like the player who got called up for England once. So Martin Kelly has hot and cold spells, but based on this game, I don't think he's getting anywhere near the first team anytime soon. Obviously, moving on now to Chung Lee, I'm going to give him a 5. He came on for Vanano, obviously at half time, as we switched the formation around. Obviously, we went from playing a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2, whichever way you look at it. We switched to a 4-3-3. Chung Lee came on. I thought he was probably one of the better players. Doesn't necessarily deserve a 6 for his efforts or for what he'd done in the game, but I've given him a 5 because I thought he came on the pitch and, you know, tried to make a difference in the game. You know, he's quite slow, so he can't really have as much impact as you would like a winger to have, obviously with him playing on the wing. And still, you know, if you look back at some of his chances, he got into the box, and instead of taking a shot, he took too long to obviously get the ball, get in the box to obviously swing, and then Olsen was able to get in a block and clear the ball away. So if you're going to bring a player on like that, yes, he may have the work ethics, he works really hard, he hasn't really got the pace, and the fact that he doesn't take his chances. If he took that chance, instead of, you know, wandering around and allowing Olsen to clear, maybe we would have been able to score on that occasion. But a 5 from him I think is a fair result. And the final substitute, Jan Kabay, I mentioned him previously, but I've given him a 6. Obviously came on for Milivojevic sort of just on the 60-minute mark, and obviously so he can play in the central midfield. I personally thought Kabay should have been playing, and based on the performance we saw in the second half, just that sort of 30 minutes we saw him on the pitch, he certainly deserves to be started in the next game, because what he brought is something that both Punchin and Milivojevic couldn't do in the second half, and that was a little bit more energy. You know, he was driving forward, having shots. He had a free kick which just went over the bar, so he came on the pitch, had a little bit more energy and a little bit more class. And if you would ask me personally, I know De Boer wants to keep the captain on the pitch, but what I would have done is I would have dropped Punchin to the bench so he can still have an influence for his captain's role, and allow Kabay and Milivojevic to play in the midfield, with James McArthur as well, because I thought that would have been a really, really good combination of players. But overall, you know, I think the substitutes came on, made an impact other than Kelly. But I think it was a really, really down, not the best performance from Palace. But certainly, much like the Huddersfield game, it can only get better from here. We've seen all the mistakes. De Boer and the team have now got a 2-week period with the international break to get things right, organise things again, and hopefully with the new additions, you know, with Sacco, who the deal is apparently close, it's just add-on fees, their discussion. If we can get Sacco, if we can get a new keeper, maybe Zoet, if we can get a new striker, maybe with these new additions, then we can start to improve again. But I must say, people are already calling for De Boer to be sacked. I'm not really going to do it because A, we haven't got the players to fit his system yet, and B, you know, it's not all bad. You know, if you look back at this game, it weren't necessarily all tactical. It's the fact that the players weren't sure how to play the system. They weren't defensively aware. So I don't necessarily think we can blame De Boer too much at the minute, because I think there's a whole lot of things like transfers, the fact that the players don't know the system, the fact that we haven't got the players for the system. There's all different things that contribute to the fact that we're not playing well. But overall, if we can get new players in, if we can finally get players who can fit the system and players who are playing in position, then certainly, hopefully, there's better results to come. Now to move on to my Man of the Match award, but before we do that and give you my Man of the Match, who I thought had the biggest influence on the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations for this week's Man of the Match award. Now what I would do every week, I'd normally run a Twitter poll after the game just to sort of see who you thought the best player was, but considering this was quite a disappointing performance and the fact that not many people were in the right frame of mind after the game, there was quite a lot of angry people on Twitter, I decided against running a Twitter poll. But what I've done is I've picked out 4 players and I've looked through Twitter and I've seen the 4 players, who people have been talking about to be the best players in their opinion, and I've sort of agreed with them, and I've picked out 4 players who I thought come away from the game not necessarily having a really, really good performance, but at least come away with the least blame because they at least tried throughout the game. And these 4 players were Andros Townsend, Timothy Fosu-Mensah, Yohan Cabaye and Chung-Yong Lee. So just to look back at what these 4 players done throughout the game, obviously none of them did score, but Andros Townsend, first on the list, he was probably one of Palace's most positive attacking threats. You know, he kept, in the first half, he put in a cross to Benteke just too high. He also had a shot where he cut inside, he had a shot just wide. In the second half, he had 3 or 4 shots within the space of 10 minutes, which went just wide. So he was trying to create something from the game and at least try and score a goal, a consolation goal. So he was at least trying. Fosu-Mensah as well, he's been immense, and if you look back at the stats, this guy has got the most tackles at the moment currently. I believe it's 16 out of any other player in the Premier League, so that just speaks volumes of how well he performed. You know, in this game, playing as a right centre-back, he was putting in blocks, putting in tackles and challenges, and even when we changed formation and he played at right back, he still put in a shift. Obviously, Yohan Cabaye and Chung-Yong Lee, they both came off the bench and made an impact in a different way. Chung-Yong Lee, you know, a little bit more direct approach he was playing. He was trying to put balls into the box, and although he was a bit slow and sluggish, he still was a bit more of an improvement to how we were playing and how static we were in the first half. And then Yohan Cabaye came on the field and added a little bit more injection of energy into the side. But who I personally think who's the man of the match, I think there's only one person really to win the award, and that is Andros Townsend. So congratulations, Andros. You don't get a trophy or a certificate, but you get my sincere congratulations on a performance where you came away with the least blame because you at least tried throughout the game and you tried to not only create chances for yourself, but also create chances for your teammates. But overall, you know, it was a really disappointing performance from the whole team, but these 4 players did stick out for me, not only like Townsend and Fosu-Mensah for what the impact they had, the time they were on the pitch, the fact they were trying to create and defend well, but also the fact that Cabaye and Chung-Yong Lee came on the pitch, you know, as a substitute with a difficult task ahead of them, and they at least tried to go forth and get something from the game. But overall, I think these 4 players should come away with the least blame. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got an exclusive interview with Frank de Boer following the game.
Frank, a disappointing result today, not what you wanted?
Yeah, you can say that, of course. You know, we're starting every game, you know, to try to get points, to win games. Every game is going to be the same, you know, when we start. And of course, this is very disappointed for everybody who loves Crystal Palace. You want to get off the mark, of course. We get some goals on the table and points, and we didn't achieve it. So it's very disappointing for everybody.
Disappointed you most about the team's performance, right?
Especially first half, didn't show any courage on the ball. You know, there were a lot of moments that we could really play, you know, on the ground, and there was no moment that we looking to feel comfortable on the ball. And I cannot say that was because Swansea did a fantastic job. It wasn't because there were two teams, I think, didn't play their best, and it was a game. Of course, if they play also 5-3-2 and we play 5-3-2, then it's normally they have one spare man left in the back and we have one spare man left in the back. So that means that you're going to have a lot of duels, and the team who makes the less mistakes win this kind of games. And that you saw the first half, I think, and also of course the second half. You know, we lose in 3 minutes. You know, we gave the game away. I think we could have done better with both goals. But the most thing I'm disappointed that we didn't show the courage. And after 2-0, I saw the courage. And then you see a whole different Crystal Palace. And this is the Crystal Palace that I want to see. And then we created our chances. They didn't create anyone anymore. And yeah, that you have to do from the start. And so I'm very disappointed in especially our first half.
Frank,
You know, it's a great quality to have. You've got talent, but just that confidence.
It looks like confident, because what I already said, if you have, there is no pressure on the ball, then you have to put it to the right color. And with a lot of times we didn't, or we turned and we didn't have no knowledge where the opponent was at that moment. So there were so many moments to hurt them, in my point of view, Swansea. But we didn't succeed at in the first half, and the second half again we did that much better.
Frank, obviously the fans sort of showed their displeasure a little bit, half-time and at full-time. Can you understand that frustration?
I'm also frustrated, and I can understand that also the fans are frustrated, because they want to see points, they want to see goals, and so they are not spoiled right now.
Could you please give us an update on Wilfried Zaha and when he's likely to return?
Yeah, I cannot give any update right now. Of course, he's a robust player, and we don't know. But you know, if you miss Ruben and Wilf, you know, Ruben was 2 times, I think, one of the best players in our squad the last 2 games, and then also Wilf, who was, you know, maybe the most impressive player of the pre-season, and you miss 2 of those players. Yeah. That's then you miss really something, and so hopefully they come back to Burnley, but I have no clue right now how long it really takes. Wilf is just in the beginning, you know, to really start up the recovery, the rehab, and I don't know. Normally they say it always goes very fast with him, but so we have to wait. And I'm positive about Ruben, but hopefully you don't get a setback.
Frank, does the international break come at the right time for you? Do what's happened in the first 3 games and the injuries?
Yeah, I cannot say, you know, we are in a very good situation right now, so I think, of course, right now it's the best thing to have, you know, 2 weeks to train, to get everybody fresh in the head again, and go for Burnley. And so I'm very happy that now the international break is there, and I can imagine for Huddersfield Town right now, who's top of the league, they say, we want to play Wednesday again. Yeah, that's normal, and so hopefully we can turn it around and in those 2 weeks and get on the leaderboard.
How can you get that self-belief back into your players? Right? They just seem tentative until they were chasing the game at 2-0.
Yes, no, yeah, that's the only thing you can say, that if you are afraid or you don't show courage, you never get what you get. And if you show courage, then you will see you create much and much more. And that belief they have to see, and we're gonna show that. We're gonna analyze that with our players, and so hopefully they can understand. We have to show it every game, and in what kind of system we play. It always depends, you know, how the opponent play. Will they press? Okay, yeah, then you have to play much faster, the longer ball. But if they don't press, just play on the ground. And after the 2-0, we did it, and that's again the Crystal Palace I want to see.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Frank de Boer had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Swansea City. But make sure to come back next week for my post-match review of the game against Burnley. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace!